And hi, everyone. Pastor Paul here with you. Glad you are with us today for what's going to be a really outstanding conversation about fierce civility. And I'm very, very much looking forward to it as we get started with our unconventional conversation today. Let me remind you to go check out my website, pastor-paul.com. Make sure you get that dash in there, pastor-paul.com, because I found out the person that has pastorpaul.com, which you don't go to, is not a very good guy. So make sure it's pastor-paul.com. You can subscribe, get on our community chat board, get a lot of other cool stuff like our unconventional conversation about deconstruction, which we had last night, and a whole lot of other cool stuff. So make sure you go to pastor-paul.com and help support the work we do and expand what we do here at the Pastor Paul community. I'm excited to have our guest today. You know, during COVID, sometimes we made friends online that we built these friendships and you think these are, really great friendships, but I don't really know this person because I've only seen them on the computer. Well, I finally was able to meet this friend in person not long ago here in California and found out we really did like each other in person in 3 dimensions as well. So let me introduce you to Joe Weston, who is my friend. He's with the Weston Network and the Fierce Civility Project. Joe is an international trainer, author, lecturer, consultant, coach, professor, and above all else, and I love this, an advocate for lasting peace, a career spanning 30 years in the fields of conflict prevention, leadership, stress management, and communication, and is a highly sought after facilitator for individuals, as well as corporations, governments, agencies, and nonprofits around the world. That's a lot, Joe. How do you find the time for all of that?
You tell me. I have no idea. I have no idea. Managed to make it work. Hi, Paul. It's great to be here. I always loved, since the day we met, I've always loved our conversations.
So this will be a good one to have today because you have a new book coming out called Fierce Civility, and you can tell us more of that whole title, but we made the title for this unconventional conversation, Can Civility Be Fierce? So tell us what it means to have fierce civility.
Well, let me tell you, there's a lot to say about that. So it's great to be here. And the title is Fierce Civility, Transforming Our Global Culture from Polarization to Lasting Peace. And that's a whole process there of a six-step pathway to hope. And the book for me is really about telling a new story of hope. One of the main questions is that we should all be asking ourselves is who is telling our story? And I find, unfortunately, that many outside forces are telling our story, and that what we first need to do is to consider that we can tell our own story, reclaim our own story, and that we should make that a story of fierce hope. Because if there's ever a time in our human history when we need that, I'm sure there are other times. I can only track the last few decades, let's just say few, but certainly now, if there's ever a time when more human beings on this planet need to step into their hearts, step in their commitment to civility in a fierce way, with us seeing themselves as catalysts for fierce hope, it's now.
And let me jump in there and ask, because terminology is important sometimes. So telling our story, what does that mean exactly? What does it mean to have my story told by somebody else? And what does it mean to take back my own story?
Well, I find that we're so bombarded now with social media, with news outlets, with how and with the world system that is basically telling a story for us, and we forget that the information we're receiving through search engine optimization, through the news outlets, through social media, is only one perspective and one person's offerings of what the truth is. And we're living in a time that I call information inflation, where there are too many news outlets chasing too few stories, that the news outlets and the social media platforms have to overinflate the stories to make them more sexy or to make them more, to add more conflict, so that the viewers choose to listen to their interpretation of that story. So which means that if we take a moment to say who's telling our story, we can first consider, that how we're receiving our information, the information we are receiving, may not be accurate. It may be a little over sensationalized and adding a little more drama than might be there. So that's the first aspect. And then to consider what I call taking some time to cultivate a healthy, independent, critical thinking, and to consider that many of the things that we believe to be true, we may have never examined. We may have just believed it because that's what our religious institutions told us, our government, our teachers, our peers, our parents. And many of those things may be true on some level, but it's a healthy thing to take some time to use what I call courageous self-reflection. And when you discover that, yes, the things that I've been taught, I really believe they are true, which I believe helps you stand more in your conviction for those things that you believe to be true. But I also find that we're holding on to a lot of things that we believe to be true that may not be, because we never took the time to examine them. So this is all part of that idea of how do we actually take some time to cultivate more personal agency and decide for ourselves what we believe to be true. And from there, live our lives and make decisions on how we engage with one another. And I'm just saying that I believe that there is a lot more hope. The news outlets, the social media, and our governments are trying to spin a story where there isn't a lot of hope, to just keep us in a dysregulated state. So, and in that dysregulated state, we're not accessing our independent critical thinking, which makes it easy for us to just believe what they want us to believe. So when we reclaim that, we might discover that we can see that there is a lot more hope around us, that there are people who really are concerned about civility and really do come from their hearts and can cut through all of the confusion that creates separation, so that we can build bridges and find solutions that are beneficial to all of us.
It's interesting because my question is, how much of sort of the disinformation, clickbait, which is a little bit of what you're referring to, being put upon us by an algorithm, and how much of it is our choice? And it's interesting today from the perspective of, we have this Fox News court case right now where we're seeing this information come out where Fox News said, if we tell the truth on our cable news network, we will lose audience. Like, we're going to lose ratings if we tell the truth. And so it begs the question, do we want to be fed misinformation? I guess, is that choosing an echo chamber for ourselves?
Well, you just opened up a big can of worms there, Paul. And I think it's important. But what you're talking to is we have choice, right? We forget that we have choice, and that there are other ways of gathering our news if we want. I think, yes, I think that in our panicky or anxious or dysregulated state, we are always seeking out what comforts us. That's just natural neurobiology. And a lot of the book deals with that I believe that a lot of us are, pretty much all of us on this planet on some level, are dealing with some level of chronic stress and trauma, whether that's personal trauma, generational trauma, cultural trauma, family trauma, and in that, and that's the core cause of the work Fierce Civility, is that we have brilliant solutions that we spend billions of dollars to solve our world problems, but they're not working because the basic fundamental issue that we're not dealing with is that in that trauma state, in that dysregulated state, when we're in that fight, flight, freeze response, we perceive anything that's different or new as a threat. And therefore we run from it. And it has shut down our hearts. And you've seen that over time, that we become more and more anxious and uncertain. And therefore we're seeking any way that we can find. And that's why we see young men and young people, let's start with young people, who will seek out groups on social media, because, to answer your question, long way around to answer your question, many of us don't want to be informed, we want to be affirmed.
Oh, wow.
We just want to soothe our anxieties, and we seek the first thing. And in that dysregulated state, that trauma state, if we don't know how to use independent critical thinking, we'll believe the first thing that comes our way and hold on to it and anchor that in as the truth.
Yeah, there's a Christian biblical principle of that talks about seeking out teachers who will soothe our itchy ears. So we want to find somebody that's going to tell us what our ears want to hear rather than anything else. And tying that then to trauma. So as you're putting this book together, and you've been doing this for a long time, of bringing sort of warring factions together and trying to get them to hear each other, is that sort of national and maybe international trauma that we're suffering from what you see as a root cause of our polarization in culture today?
Yes, I would say that is the root cause. Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
mean, there are many causes, and all in the work I do, whether it's this body of work, Fierce Civility, or the respectful confrontation work I do, which is about how do we learn how to stand in our power, speak our truth, get our needs met in a way where we don't harm others and we don't get harmed. It's, one of the subtitles of all the work is, for instance, respectful confrontation or fierce civility. It's never about the dishes. And that what we do is we can spend years fighting with our spouses or our partners or our children about not doing the dishes, and not taking the moment to consider that strategy that you've been doing for 14 years is just not working. So the work is, how do you get yourself regulated? How do you cultivate inner balance so that you're not in a fight, flight, freeze response? And how do you create safety and trust around you so you can help the one you're engaging with soothe their nervous systems in that space of safety and trust, meet them where they are, and from there, using independent critical thinking, finding ways to engage in the conversation. And that is the essence of the work. It's possible. That is the key. The work of Fierce Civility focuses very explicitly on saying it's not about the what, but about the how. Because you can see it happening. You see it in politics. You see it in education. You see it even in our personal lives. We can spend years going back and forth about the what, about debating certain issues and arguing about it, which creates more polarization, which for me is about stagnation. So the Fierce Civility book isn't really about the what, it's about the how. How do you have these conversations? And what I would say is it's cultivating the skills and strategies of the heart. And that's not a sentimental Hallmark Cardi kind of viewpoint about the heart, but the heart, the transformational power of the heart. How do we appeal to the hearts of others? How do we help people regulate their systems so that they can consider transforming their viewpoints, habits, and patterns? And are we courageous enough to consider that as we're talking to people who have different truths, that maybe how we see something isn't completely 100% true, so that we might even open up to shifting our viewpoints, habits, and patterns? What do you think?
Yeah, how do we keep from becoming the other side of that coin and saying, but I'm right. It's okay that I only get information that supports my viewpoint because we're right.
Right. And the pivot to that. So in this work, I talk about the power of the pivot. So all of my work is based on, I always say it starts with my experience of growing up in New York City. I'm a Queens boy. And why that's important is, I always say that just growing up in New York City, every day was an examination of confrontation and conflict and understanding how to navigate that. And so in this process of how do you approach things without getting dysregulated in that way? Yeah.
But we all have that uncle, or that cousin,
Right.
or that father-in-law that just can't be reasoned with. Are there some people that you just cannot do this with, that Fierce Civility won't work?
Right. So that's the point. So in this examination, I started seeing how our own internal polarizations is adding to the external stagnation of the polarizations. And particularly to that point, one of the the pivots, the power of the pivot in the work that I've done, what helped me work through a lot of my dysregulation, and also how I was adamant in my viewpoints, was actually martial arts, and understand particularly Tai Chi and Aikido, of understanding balance and understanding mind-body connection, understanding how to cultivate deeper awareness and presence and listening and staying in balance and flow. And to learn how to take the agitation or the what another would give me and learn how to redirect that energy so that I don't get caught in the same fight, flight, freeze response of aggressor or defender. And one of the main points of breaking out of stagnant polarization is what I call the power of the pivot. How do we pivot? How do we just shift without losing sight of the thing that we want to confront or engaging, and not fighting it and not acquiescing, staying engaged and keeping it in that dynamic? And to that question, when you get stuck in what I call the right-wrong loop, the pivot is to ask yourself, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective?
Mm.
Is it more important for me to stand in my rightness, or do I really want to find new solutions with this person? Do I really want to find reconciliation and healing? Do I want to get us back to, and that's a lot of the issues, appealing to the heart is just with the cousin or the uncle, to remember that there was probably a time 10 years ago when you had so much fun watching a football game or just laughing about stories. And how do we get back? That's the pivot of saying, if we just stay in the issues, we're never going to see solutions. But how do we pivot, come back to ourselves, to our own hearts, our own compassion and curiosity, activate that in another, and basically say, from one humanity to the other, let's get back to who we really are, know each other to be.
Mm.
And the question is, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective?
Yeah. So this is the website, and I'm just taking a break here in our discussion to let you pub the book. This is your website at joeweston, WESTON.com. For those of you who are looking on video, for our audio listeners, that's the website, joeweston.com. And the book isn't out yet, right? But is coming out soon. When is it coming out?
The book is coming out on March 9th. Please make a note of that date. Put it in your calendar. If you go to Amazon and look up Fierce Civility on March 9th, you can actually get, for one day only, a 99-cent pre-order purchase of the ebook. The printed version will come out a week later, but if you could do that, that would be great. Or I think if you go to joeweston.com, you'll see that there's a place to sign up for our website, and we can send you that link on the 9th and keep you informed about when that comes out.
Fierce Civility, Transforming Our Global Culture from Polarization to Lasting Peace is the book, and Joe Weston is our author here. And when we're talking about, you have some exercises in the book when it comes out that people can try. Give us sort of an example of that. If I'm dealing with Uncle Fred and he's telling me that Joe Biden is eating children in the White House, what does that pivot look like?
Well, before you can get to a pivot, because what's going to probably happen what happens for me, I can say, and everybody else I know, as soon as that uncle or cousin says that, you're going to get activated. Your nervous system's going to go into fight, flight, freeze. So, and once that's there, there's no way back. You're really in it, and there's no way back. However, I do offer a practice to help you get back, in a sense, and it's cultivating inner balance. And it's an exercise that I've been doing for so many years with all of the meditation work I've done and all my different traditions, with Taoist traditions, Buddhist traditions, also with the martial arts and many other concentration focus, like with movement and sports, is to learn how to cultivate a connection with your core in alignment with your heart and your brain, so that you can cultivate more awareness. And by integrating all of that, you're more in your body, and you are more compact and connected to your heart, which for me, the heart doesn't mean necessarily emotions. It's where our wisdom resides. It's where our best selves reside. It's where we can cut through the confusion of the mental constructs of separation and get back to common sense, where we can find common ground. So this exercise, one of the things that I've been very blessed to do in my life was to work with severely wounded combat veterans here in the US. For me, I did that as a civilian. I was brokenhearted to see at that time that every day 22 combat veterans were taking their lives. Luckily, it's now down to 17. It broke my heart. And I thought to myself, I have to do something. So I looked for organizations that I can work with and created a system working with some fabulous organizations to support them in their mental health with PTSD, but also teaching them communication skills to re-engage with their families, their healthcare providers. And I developed a very basic exercise that to help for when they would spin out or have flashbacks, or if we, for instance, are in a state of just with all the things we're doing with trying to manage taking care of the kids and working and doing the shopping and the cooking and dealing with driving and how we get dysregulated. And it's really very simple when you get it. And it has to do with basically just feeling your feet on the ground, focusing in your lower belly, what I call your center, bringing awareness to your heart, and taking deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just that simple act of feeling your feet on the ground, focusing in your core and your heart, and slow, deep breaths on the inhale, and just letting the breath spill out of your mouth on the exhale, it activates because it's a neurobiology tactic in a sense. Because when we're in that fight, flight, freeze response, our sympathetic nervous system is activated. And that is what activates the adrenaline and the cortisol and all of the things that that make sure we don't get eaten by hungry tigers, which is basically the biology of human beings. However, luckily, we also have the parasympathetic nervous system, is that when we no longer have a threat, different hormones get activated, oxytocin and things like that, where we get to relax the system. And it's with that breathing that we get to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Why that is powerful is, I believe it's been helpful for me, is that we may not be able to influence at all times the stressors around us, but how we perceive those stressors, that is what we have power over.
So we're responding in sort of a PTSD response, assuming maybe the worst is going to happen in this encounter with this person. And we kind of start to tell ourselves there are other possibilities when we start to get in touch with our, like I say, less of our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and more of, I want to engage with this person. Am I summarizing that somewhat into what you just said?
Yes, because what yes, and that's necessary. And I think that's what I say is why a core cause. Because if you're dysregulated and you're not in your heart and you're in fight mode, the other person's going to feel that, and it's just going to activate them into that state. But by coming back to yourself, you then can accurately assess the situation. And when you do that, another important pivot is that being uncomfortable is not necessarily the same as being unsafe. And for people who suffer from trauma or chronic stress, our nervous systems can't tell the difference anymore between uncomfortable and unsafe. And any encounter with someone who holds different views, any challenging conversation is always going to be uncomfortable. Therefore, if you're not aware of it, your nervous system is going to instantly go into, it's unsafe here. And there's no new solutions that are going to emerge. There's no reconciliation and healing that's going to happen. There's no bridge building that's going to happen. So in a sense, it's learning how to build a moment-to-moment relationship with your nervous system so that you can say, when you do get activated, thank you, nervous system. You're really taking care of me because this is uncomfortable. And our first most important thing is that we do feel safe. But I can take some deep breaths, come back to some level of balance, and assess that even though my uncle is really, 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 really annoying, I'm not unsafe. Unless I am. And if I am, then I would say remove yourself from the situation. But if they're just that same old uncle, it's not unsafe, yet it's uncomfortable. And then you can manage it from there. So actually the training of Fierce Civility, the Fierce Civility Ambassador training, is modeled after sports and martial arts training, where any good athlete must learn how to navigate high levels of stress and tension and still have effective decision-making and function optimally and make effective choices in that moment. And that's what the Fierce Civility skill set is training if you choose to practice fierce civility, that means that you choose to build bridges. You choose to find win-win solutions. You choose to communicate in a way that is creative and leads to new solutions, and honors every individual engaged, and that requires skill.
And I think you said something really important in there too, as well as the importance of these exercises. There is a point where it's just like, hey, it's just not safe to talk to Uncle about these topics, and either we boundary off the topics or we boundary off Uncle Joe, right? And that danger isn't just physical danger. Is that correct?
It's not just physical danger. So it's emotional danger. It's an emotional threat of danger. Yeah, or it could be emotional danger, lack of safety, let's say. And the only person, I believe, the only person who determines if you are safe or not is you yourself. Because someone might say, oh, what are you making a big deal about it? Mm. And that oftentimes that's when we acquiesce and say, yeah, actually, I can toughen it up and I can take it. But those are the olden times and that's a different way of looking at resilience. Resilience isn't enduring and suffering. Resilience should be, at least in my model, is about vitality and what I say, physical vitality, emotional grounding, mental clarity, and spiritual grounding. Mm. And there is a real, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's, gaslighting is a term that gets way overused now, but that's how I hear that, is when somebody says, no, you're not this, that, or the other thing, or don't be this, that, like you're saying, we get to say, no, I determine if that's true for me or not. You don't get to make that choice.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. We're talking to Joe Weston about the book here. And well, I guess I want to go to one of the comments here on our live feed from Alexis. She says, I think it's too soon for civility, says Alexis. Too much sludge is still coming out from the cesspit. Cover it up. It will stink under the Band-Aid of civility. So what is your response to Alexis there, raising a point about civility being a cover-up for bad things?
First of all, Alexis, you're obviously a poet. You write that so eloquently describe our current situation in the world. I'd like to quote you on that. That was brilliant. It's sludge, and we're going through the sludge. And I would say I see it the same way. If you notice a fierce civility shift in the terminology, we don't say agree or disagree. I say I see it the same way. Or if I don't see it the same way, I say I don't see it the same way. I see it the same way because civility on its own is not going to solve our problems. And that's a key part of this work is, the title of this, Can Civility Be Fierce? I think next time, Paul, when we have a conversation, we should have the conversation, can fierce be civil? Because you like that, huh?
I do like that. I do like, because we're in this season of alpha male, and we need real men, and yeah. I think it is fierce. Coming from a Christian background like me, I think the story of Jesus is about a guy who was a real badass in his ability not to have to strike back against his attackers. I think that takes serious balls, if you can let me use that type of slang. And we have this kind of swing in the other direction of alpha male, and we need real men who will do violent things to keep women safe. And it's so I think there's a real juxtaposition between the courage to not raise your fist is really more powerful than the guy that will go to fight anytime he feels a sense of safety and discomfort.
I would say Jesus Christ is the perfect example of someone who practices fierce civility, where they're able to be, literally, like in their hearts, in a way that we all cultivate, dream of being, aspire to be in, with a level of fierceness of standing in their truth and their power, and to do that in a way where it gives every individual that comes towards them, even the ones who may want to harm, the opportunity to come back to their humanity, and in a sense, and the ultimate goal of someone who practices fierce civility is to train themselves to be a nurturer and protector, and that we can rewire our basic primal state of either being defender, aggressor, or acquiescing, and becoming nurturer and protector. So I would say yes, civility as we're currently doing it could never stand up to the lack of civility we are currently seeing. We have seen a breakdown of civil discourse in a way that I don't think we've seen that in my generation, and I have the definition of civility, and you'll get an idea. Alexis, you might find this interesting. The definition of civility is cultured courtesy, politeness, a polite act or expression characterized by taste, refinement, or restraint. Now, that may work in a 19th century novel in ways, and there may be some communities where some people can practice that in some ways, but that is not going to stand fiercely and match what we're currently seeing with lack of civility and a rewarding of lack of civility. So we need to, and I call that chronic niceness. We're all suffering from chronic niceness. Either we actually are perpetrators of it or victims of it. And chronic niceness is these like mask-like these smiles we have that are facades, and we can do the cruelest things with very civil words and very civil smiles and very civil way we approach ourselves, and it's perpetuating the same cycle. And the fierce civility is trying to break that polarization of, you have people who are either like on the side of aggression and fierceness in the most aggressive and violent term of it, and you have people who are suffering from chronic niceness. And fierce civility is kind of a synthesis, an alchemy of both, that we can be fierce in our civility. And because the definition of civility that I mentioned, unfortunately, if we hold on to that, we perpetuate the same problems. And I always say, in a sense, where we say yes when we should say no, we say no when we should say yes, we say nothing when injustices are happening, when the people that our families or our institutions or where we go to worship are causing harm to others. And it requires a deep level of fierceness to not fight that, because fighting the system just makes the system stronger. Becoming a bully to try to bully a bully just makes you a bully. And that fierceness, Paul, as you know, with a lot of the things that you're exploring and researching, to be able to stand in your truth and live a lifestyle and a way of being where, and I've worked with people around the world, in the Middle East and Europe and various places, where people can literally be killed for choosing to live their lives according to how they believe that's authentic to themselves. That's fierce. And there's a story that I always tell in terms of understanding this in the context of fierceness. It's a Taoist story where the master says to the student, "What is stronger, a mighty oak or a blade of grass?" And after a long debate, the conclusion is that in a monsoon, the mighty oak will snap like a twig, but the blade of grass will always persevere and ultimately stand tall. So there are times in our lives when we need to be that mighty oak. We need to stand strong. We need to be protectors for our families, for ourselves, for what we believe in. And there are also times when we have to practice yielding and adapting. And that doesn't make us weak. That doesn't mean that doesn't make us submissive. There's actually a lot of strength in that. And I would say, if I may continue, that it's in that softness that there's power. That's the martial arts aspect of it. That's a lot of the water, for instance, the way rivers flow. They create deep rivers. And that the more we practice that, the more we can find that we can deal with other people's reactivity and do it in a way where we can still stay engaged.
It's good. It's good. I'm sorry, I'm muting my mic a little bit because we have jets flying over right now. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's since Chinese balloons came, or we have a air defense base out by our airport here, and the jets are really taking off these days. So I'm not sure what's going on here on the West Coast. But Joe Weston is my guest here. We're talking about Fierce Civility. The book is Fierce Civility, and I can't read that bottom of the title. Fill in the rest for me, Joe.
I'll do that for you. Sorry. Transforming our global culture from polarization to lasting peace.
And there's the website at joeweston.com, and you can check it out. Pre-sale is happening March 9th. The book comes out, so go there and check out all that cool stuff. We're going to talk more about the spirituality behind this, but so Joe, tell everybody what they need to do before we get into that. They go to the website and sign up to get email and such from you when the book is ready to hit the shelves.
Yeah. So go to joeweston.com and you'll see a page. The new website's coming out this weekend, so you won't get to see the full website yet, but there should be a link for you to sign up for our mailing list, and we will send you the information to get the link. The link will come out. The Amazon link to purchase the book will be coming out on March 9th, which is the date that we are offering a special discounted 99-cent purchase of the ebook. So mark your calendars for March 9th. When you wake up in the morning, you can purchase that, and that'll be delivered right to you, and you can start reading.
Awesome.
I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, that's great. And I've had a chance to read some of the ways through the book, and I really like it. And I think it's just such a vital thing. And we've been talking about fierce civility and as a way to deal with the root causes of polarization in our culture. And you alluded to this, but is this a new thing? I mean, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton shot guns at each other over disputes. We've had, but is it worse today? So sometimes we feel like this is the worst it's ever been. Is it a new thing, and is it an international thing, or is it kind of uniquely American, or at least more American perhaps than some other places?
Well, I would say America is always going to big gulp it. So yeah, it is. And being a citizen also of the Netherlands, having lived there for many years, and talking to a lot of my European friends, the level of polarization is off the charts at the moment. And for me, polarization is about stagnation. It's like two rams ramming into each other, trying to, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm going to win, and you're going to lose, and we get, no, I'm good, and you're bad, and we get caught in this, and all that energy. If you think the rams, if they don't do this, but if they were to do this, just keep ramming, they would exhaust themselves. And I feel like we're doing that over the last certainly 50 or 60 years, but certainly the last decade or two. We've seen an increase in an ongoing breakdown of civil discourse, civic engagement, independent critical thinking, and personal agency, which is what is causing the anxiety, and our hearts are shut down. I think a lot of it has to do with economically, that many of us are now living in communities where we don't engage with people who are different anymore. The pandemic exacerbated that because we weren't being out and engaging with people who were different. Politics has become polarized. The media has kept us in this state of constant polarization and dysregulation. And therefore, this idea, going back to Alexa's question, this idea of civility, it's almost like something from the past, this idea. And unfortunately, what I think is those of us who do hold on to this idea of civility, it's become elitist, which only creates more suspicion. And it's interesting, I start my book with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that she said in 1960, at the height of the nuclear threat between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Interesting, the cycles we're in. And she said, we have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together, or we are going to have to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, we have to talk. And those are wise words. And basically, Fierce Civility is answering that call. I offer an upgraded communication model that can meet the lack of civility and breakdown of civil discourse and personal agency, so that we can get back to each other. And for me, there's a real spiritual component to this. When I look at the world system and see how I refer to the world system as the global heart, and our global heart is not well. It's really not well. It's total, and the cause of that, I'm not a doctor, but I have my prognosis, is that we have created a world system where we are technologically overfed and spiritually malnourished. And that therefore, as any good doctor, we need a balanced diet of both technological nourishment as well as spiritual nourishment. And again, that's really key what I'm saying, that I'm not saying we just need one or the other. We benefit from the technology. And for me, that's about the intellect, all the things, economics and into the intellect. We need the intellect. We need to cultivate that. However, it's out of balance. We're gorging ourselves in that, and we're malnourished in the spiritual things, which is about cultivating more humanity, becoming the nurturer and protector, and qualities of the heart, which include wisdom. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Paul, I've got plenty more to say about that, but what are your thoughts on that?
So much to say. And when religion versus spirituality, I think, is important to look at here, because I come from a very religious Christian evangelical background. And at some point I found my spiritual pursuit through evangelicalism actually made my heart more sick toward other people. It brought its own exclusiveness and its own supremacy, and made it difficult for me to connect with others, and then a really exclusive view of God. And really this sort of angry God made me angry too, just like I found right-wing media was making me angry. So I'm finding in this season, and I know you are a practitioner of spiritual practices that have influenced me in a lot of ways, and finding a better route of spirituality that draws me. I think I define it like, is it drawing me to my better self? Is it drawing me to connect with love and goodness that is beyond my own ability to be good and to love others? Then that is a true spirituality to pursue. And if religion gets into the mix sometimes, I think it takes us away from being drawn to love and goodness, to being more, again, back into that echo chamber life of we've got it right and we need to convince everybody else that we're right because they're wrong. So it can be its own exclusion if we're not careful.
Of course, and that comes right into how I would look at, if I were to redefine civility. I just redefine fierceness of what it's, and what I want to say about that is that wherever we are completely rigid, like that oak tree, we will snap. If we're rigid, physically, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, we're easily susceptible to others, and we basically snap. But in terms of civility and the spiritual nourishment, I could trace that with my studies. I'm not saying I'm a scholar in this, but of all different religions and all different spiritual traditions and ethical traditions and native indigenous traditions, I came up with 5 common highest guiding principles that you could extract from all of them to get, in a sense, to get rid of all the noise. And if we could just resonate from that to me is what true civility is. And those 5 highest common guiding principles are respect, dignity, which to me is about being valued, belonging, freedom, and collaboration. And if you follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, or any great teacher or any great spiritual being, to me, that's at the essence. I'm not saying I'm right. That's just how I've interpreted. People might have their own view of that. But the importance in that is that that's what will cultivate our spiritual nourishment, is if we can cultivate respect, dignity, belonging, freedom, and collaboration, and not just for ourselves, and not expect it, like feel like we are privileged and we deserve it, but to realize that it's a blessing that we can feel respected, that we can have dignity, that we belong, that we are free, and that we can collect. It's a blessing. And you cultivate the highest level of those principles when you realize, if I can feel the blessings of that, then I will commit my life on a daily basis to make sure that every human being on this planet has access to belonging, to dignity, to respect, that they determine what for them it means to be free, and that we learn how to collaborate and work together. That to me is what spiritual nourishment is. That's to me the fierceness in fierce civility, to become a nurturer and protector, to realize I have privilege, I have access to information, power, and resources. If I don't, then I want to find a way to cultivate that. If I do, then it's my obligation to support others in getting that as well.
Yeah, because that belonging is such a natural human, not just desire, but need. We are pack animals, but if belonging becomes agreement around a set of rules or ideas or ideologies, that's when it can become really damaging. So I think that collaboration is really important. And in Christianity, we use the two highest commands, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus described who is your neighbor as that person from another race, another religion, another nationality that you don't think worthy of favor as much as you're worthy of it. And you've coined your own term of love thy stranger. So what does love thy stranger mean exactly?
Oh, I love that you brought that up. So in one of the chapters, so the key to the work, if we want to be part of the movement of fierce civility, of being nurturers and protectors, and breaking the gridlock of the polarization, getting more of us back to our hearts, where we can really engage with each other. One of the key concepts of that is finding alliances in surprising places. Because I've been saying this for so many years in all of my lectures and workshops and discussions. If only hanging out with people who already agree with you was going to solve our world problems, we would have already solved our world problems. So therefore, the conclusion is, if we want to solve our world problems that's more equitable and sustainable and inclusive for everyone, then we have to have the courage and the skills to reach out and connect with people who are different and hold different views in a way that's safe and that can get to deeper levels of correct collaboration. And if you're doing it from your humanity to the humanity of others, you cut through the mental constructs of religion and political beliefs and all of that, and you get back to your humanity and their humanity, and suddenly you're seeing a human being who also wants to advocate for more civility and is tired of this mess. And that's how you build new alliances. So it starts with the concept of love thy neighbor, but expanding that globally. We can no longer be isolationists. We can no longer just be in our own communities and think that other people's suffering is not going to eventually affect us. It's naive. I don't, if that sounds judgmental, I'm sorry, but I just think it's naive, short-sighted. So we have to, and so love thy neighbor, when it was first presented, I'm going to assume a couple of millennia ago or more, it was for a community that maybe had a couple of dozen people or more. So that made sense. We have to expand it to include every human being on this planet. However, so it's love thy neighbor. We have to cultivate that. But sometimes we get into this polarity of how do we then reach out to people who are different? And of course, there are teachings in love thy enemy. I don't know if that's such a healthy thing. That's also can be like a false sense of chronic niceness. Why should I turn the other cheek? And especially if I come, I'm not speaking for myself, but for people who come from oppressed societies. Why should I love an enemy, someone who literally thinks I'm less than them, or who has harmed me in some way? But again, you get in this polarization of loved one and enemy. And to break, again, the power of the pivot, you need some kind of shift. So I introduced that we should stop or consider not doing it anymore, to lump all people into the binary of loved one and enemy. That's what's maintaining the stagnation of the polarization. If you introduce a third, you shake it up and you have more options. So introduce the concept of stranger. The beauty of that is that if you do the math, with 8 billion people on the planet, you can never tell me that I don't have any strangers that I can engage with. There's got to be at least 7 billion of them that you could engage with. And it's in that we build small bridges. We don't have to reach out to the ones who are the most extreme, where we could get harmed. And in fact, engaging with them and trying to find commonality can only just exacerbate the problem. But there are so many people who aren't so triggering, that are strangers. They're your neighbors. They're people in the supermarket. They're on the other side of the world. If we can commit to looking at people as strangers and realizing that may not threaten us as much, we can build those alliances, which suddenly makes that's a way of bringing us more into balance with technological and spiritual nourishment.
I think, and fierce civility is such a great term for it. You know, in the teachings of turn the other cheek, and Jesus is quoted in biblical text as saying, "If forced to go a mile, go two." It's turn the status quo on its head if status quo isn't working, and the concept of going 2 miles was a Roman law that, as the Roman oppressors had taken over Palestine, a soldier could force anyone to carry their equipment for them for 1 mile. And so there was this idea of like, well, I'll carry it for a mile, but then I'll tell you what an SOB you are. And Jesus is saying the more powerful position is to say, oh, you want me to go a mile? I'll go 2. And then we could start to translate into that. Well, maybe through me standing in my power, even as I'm being oppressed, I start to have an impact on the oppressor. I start to show them that I'm not nearly the threat that they think I am. And we start to break down some of these barriers. Because I've found it, I've lost a lot of Christian friends and am now very close friends with people I thought I could never be friends with before. Because once you get across the table from somebody or on a Zoom together with somebody, and I saw President Biden say this about Dylan Mulrooney, a trans woman, the other day. Like, when you sit together, all of a sudden you're like, this is who Fox News is telling me to be afraid of. This is who my pastor is saying is evil and going to hell. They seem pretty kind. They seem pretty cool. And so I think you're right that none of that is like, slaves, allow your master to beat you and say, thank you, give me more. But it is like, stand in your power and let them see that you are human and worthwhile, that you value yourself. And I really think that is the fierceness of that teaching.
Well, first of all, you brought it all the way back to who's telling your story, right? So when you do that, you realize, wow, the story I've been told, that they're evil or that they're bad or whatever, they're going to harm me or I'm going to be contaminated by their viewpoints or whatever, it's just not true. You won't know that until you investigate. And you're doing that so beautifully. And in essence, and what you do so beautifully, Paul, is imagine if we just thought of ourselves as creating spaces of refuge. That wherever we go, when we're sitting in a restaurant, when we're whatever, that we create safe space. And that so that people can show up authentically and show us who they truly are. And what that does is it cuts through the mental constructs. All of our problems at this moment, I would say, if we're stuck in our heads and the intellect, are caused, all of them, many of them, or you could view it this way, by our mental constructs, is what you're saying. If we don't examine it, we just believe, we believe that we're separate. If we have more time, we can show how each creature on this planet is completely and utterly interdependent and interconnected. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Every creature, in nature as human beings. And the idea that we're separate is simply a mental construct. So since it's simply a mental construct, we have the power to change that mental construct and come up with a new one that says that we are all interrelated in some way, some more than others. I don't have to like you. I don't have to see it the same way you do. However, I need to acknowledge that we're all in this together. There's a lot of what Eleanor Roosevelt said. We're either all going to die together or we're going to learn to live together. And that's where we are right now.
And it's love your neighbor as yourself. There is a self-love involved in that command. And, there's just so many examples of this. I remember watching a documentary about Zero Dark 30, about the American killing of Osama bin Laden. And a CIA agent said, the only way we ever solve the Middle East crisis, or whatever the term was that he uses, we have to stop bombing things. We have to stop bombing things over there, because every time we bomb something, we prove to the people of that part of the world that we are what Al-Qaeda is saying we are. We verify their terms, and more parents start giving their kids over to terrorist groups. Yeah. And so there does have to be a point in the Hatfields and McCoys. Somebody has to stop killing people from the other side, or eventually you're just all gone. Yeah. And there's no peace in living in all of that. So yes, there is a power and a fierceness in laying down our fists and trying to use our strength of loving ourselves to love people that maybe we feel like we can't love otherwise, to try to come to some sort of peace that gives us all the space to live well.
That's beautiful, Paul. You speak that so beautifully. Can I read a couple of quotes that in this time?
Sure.
And I quote this, I have this in my book, The Teachings of Jesus Christ. Love thy neighbor as you would love thyself. The Teachings of the Buddha. Look for your own happiness and you find suffering. Seek the hardship of helping others and you experience true happiness. The Teachings of Muhammad. No one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. The Teachings of the Jewish mystics. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. That is entire law. All the rest is commentary. So yeah, commonality. There's a common theme running through all of that.
That's a universal principle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Let's finish with this. And I've gone a little over the time I told you we were going to go, and I hope that's okay. But what would you say is one thing that people who are hanging out here with us can do starting today to make a difference in all of this turmoil in our culture right now?
I would say reach out to trust your heart and your intuition. If you're just feeling, wow, I've been thinking this person's been popping into my head, send them a text, just a heart emoji, because you don't know, that could be they could be really struggling, and they could be even considering taking their lives in that moment, and that one text might shift that all for them. Think about ways of becoming a nurturer and protector. Think about and to expand that. What can you do if you're on public transportation or in a public place? Take out your earbuds and listen and see what's around you, and engage with others. And if it feels safe, engage with people you don't know. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Cultivate resilience. Find ways to renew your energy. If you're listening to this, and if you have some spiritual practice or committed to something, the world needs you right now. How can you cultivate your own personal agency and find ways to replenish and nurture yourself? I teach a lot. I teach a course on stress reduction and resilience, and with people who suffer from burnout and high levels of chronic stress. And I always say, I find it so funny that we will panic if we walk into a public place and we look at our phone and we have 2% on our phone. We will panic to run to find a place we can plug in our charger. If we had that same level of panic when our battery, our internal battery was at 2%, it would be a very different world, and you would be much more vibrant, joyful, healthy, balanced, and clear. So we take care of our devices and our cars, but more often than we take care of ourselves. So think about what you can do to nourish yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And you will find that you will be able to get more done with less effort. You'll feel more powerful and resilient to actually find ways to find win-win solutions with others and to bridge. And listen. Another thing I would say.
Beautiful stuff. It's Fierce Civility. The book is coming out March 9th. If you're listening to this on the podcast and it's after March 9th, the book is out. But right now, as we're doing this live today, go to joeweston.com and check out all the opportunities to get the book in pre-sale. Find out I highly recommend it. And I think this is a season where we need people who can be fiercely civil and change the world, Joe. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fun. Once again, Paul, a lot of fun.
Always fun to talk to you. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, let the people go, and then you and I will wrap up together. So thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us today. Go check out the book, Fierce Civility, joeweston.com, and also go to my website, pastor-paul.com. I want you to help me continue to grow the work of the Pastor Paul community here. So pastor-paul.com. You can subscribe. You can look at my coaching services and all the things we do there, because we need people who are fiercely civil and able to do a little bit of conflict and hang out. So thanks, guys. Have a great